My name is Cassandra, and I'm 28 years old. I'm standing in my childhood home's dining room in Connecticut, surrounded by 23 family members at our annual Thanksgiving dinner. Nobody here knows I lost my job 2 months ago. My mother, Dorothy, is raising her champagne glass for a toast, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around the crystal stem. I thought I knew what humiliation felt like, until that moment when her eyes found mine across the room. Before I share what destroyed and rebuilt me that night, tell me where you're watching from. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, please subscribe and like this video. Growing up as the middle child in the Montgomery family meant living in a constant state of comparison. My older brother Marcus became an investment banker at 25, the golden boy who could do no wrong. My younger sister Emma, the genius who got into medical school at 21, was the baby everyone adored. And then there was me, Cassandra, perpetually stuck in the middle, perpetually not quite enough. I remember the day I graduated cum laude from Columbia Law School. I was so proud, clutching my diploma, waiting for my mother's approval. But all she could talk about was how Marcus had graduated magna cum laude from Harvard Business School 3 years earlier. That pretty much summed up my entire childhood and adult life. Every achievement I earned was immediately diminished by comparison to my siblings' accomplishments. My career path was another source of disappointment for my mother. While Marcus was making 6 figures moving money around for wealthy clients, I chose environmental law, working for a non-profit that fought against corporate polluters. My mother would introduce Marcus as my son, the investment banker at Goldman Sachs, and Emma as my daughter, the future surgeon. When it came to me, she'd pause, then say, "And this is Cassandra. She works for some charity." The non-profit wasn't just some charity. We were doing important work holding corporations accountable for destroying communities and ecosystems. But to my mother, if it didn't come with a hefty paycheck and prestigious title, it didn't count. Success in her world was measured in dollars, square footage, and designer labels. 2 months ago, our funding got cut. The biggest donor pulled out after pressure from the very corporations we were investigating. Just like that, 8 years of my career vanished. 60 people lost their jobs that day, including me. I should have told my family immediately, but I couldn't bear to hear my mother's reaction. I could already imagine her voice dripping with false sympathy, saying she always knew this would happen when I chose such an unstable career path. So I kept it secret. Every morning I left my small Brooklyn apartment dressed for work. I spent my days at coffee shops, applying for jobs, networking, trying to figure out my next move. My savings were dwindling, but I kept up appearances. When my family asked about work, I gave vague answers about ongoing cases and busy schedules. My mother, Dorothy Montgomery, built her real estate empire from nothing, or so she loved to remind us. She started with 1 rental property and turned it into a portfolio worth millions. She had connections everywhere, from City Hall to Wall Street. She knew everyone who mattered and made sure everyone knew she knew them. Her success was undeniable, but it came at a price that our family paid daily. She ruled our family like she ruled her business empire, with an iron fist wrapped in a silk glove. Every interaction was a transaction. Every conversation was a performance review. Love was conditional, doled out based on achievement, and withdrawn for failure. She had a way of making you feel worthless, with just a look crushing your spirit, with a casual comment disguised as concern. My father Harold was a different story. Once upon a time, he'd been a passionate history professor at Yale, but 30 years of marriage to Dorothy had worn him down to a shadow of his former self. He rarely spoke at family gatherings anymore, just nodded along to whatever mother said. When she criticized us kids, he'd look away, studying his plate, like it held the secrets of the universe. I used to resent his silence, but as I got older, I began to understand it was his survival mechanism. The extended family was no better. They all orbited around my mother like planets around the sun, dependent on her gravitational pull of money and influence. Uncle Robert, her younger brother, managed several of her properties and never missed an opportunity to remind me that real careers meant real money. Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, had borrowed heavily from my mother to start her boutique, and now couldn't say no to any of her demands. My cousins were all caught up in the same performance, each trying to prove their worth through their achievements and acquisitions. Cousin Lauren had just gotten engaged to a hedge fund manager, and she made sure everyone noticed her 3-carat diamond ring. Cousin James had just made junior partner at his law firm, the right kind of law, corporate mergers and acquisitions, not the bleeding heart kind I practiced. This Thanksgiving was supposed to be like all the others, a carefully choreographed display of the Montgomery family's success. The dining room would be decorated with the finest china and crystal. The meal would be catered by the best restaurant in town, though my mother would take credit for the recipes passed down through generations. Everyone would dress in their finest clothes and share their latest accomplishments, each trying to outshine the others. But this year felt different from the moment I walked through the door. My mother's eyes lingered on me longer than usual, her smile a bit too sharp. She knew something. I could feel it in the way she watched me like a cat who'd already caught the mouse, but was enjoying playing with it before the kill. I arrived at my parents' mansion in Greenwich, not Connecticut, as I sometimes mistakenly said when I was nervous at 2 p.m. The house stood like a monument to my mother's success, 6,000 square feet of perfectly maintained colonial architecture, complete with columns and a circular driveway that could accommodate 20 cars. Today it was nearly full. The whole family had come for the annual Thanksgiving gathering. Lauren met me at the door immediately, thrusting her left hand in my face. 3 carrots, she announced as if I couldn't see the massive rock myself. Bradley proposed at the Rainbow Room. It was perfect. She looked at my bare ring finger with what she probably thought was sympathy, but came across as smugness. Don't worry, Cassie, your time will come. Inside the house buzzed with conversation and competition. In the living room, Marcus held court, describing his recent promotion to partner. Youngest in the firm's history, he said, accepting congratulations with practiced humility. His wife Jennifer stood beside him, her smile frozen in place like she'd been holding it so long it had cramped. Emma was in the sunroom surrounded by aunts and cousins talking about her acceptance to Johns Hopkins for her residency. They only take 12 residents a year, she explained. The competition was insane. She glanced at me as I passed, her expression softening for a moment. Of all my family, Emma was the only one who sometimes seemed to see through the facade. I made my way through the rooms, dodging questions about my work with practiced ease. Oh, same old battles, I'd say with a laugh. Corporate polluters don't take holidays. Accent. Most people accepted this and moved on to talking about themselves, which suited me fine. But my mother was everywhere watching. When I helped myself to appetizers, she appeared beside me. Stress eating, dear? She asked, eyeing my plate. Jennifer was just telling me about her new Pilates instructor. Perhaps you should get her number. When I talked to my father in his study, she materialized in the doorway. Harold, don't hide away with Cassandra. Our guests are asking for you. The way she said my name made it sound like I was contaminating him. Uncle Robert cornered me by the bar. Still fighting the good fight? He asked, making air quotes around good fight. There's an opening at my firm for a real lawyer. Someone who understands that the law is about making money, not changing the world. You can't eat principles, Cassandra. I'm doing fine, Uncle Robert, I replied, pouring myself a generous glass of wine. Are you, though? He leaned in closer, bourbon heavy on his breath. Your mother mentioned you've been having some difficulties. No shame in admitting you need help. Family is family. My stomach dropped. What exactly had my mother mentioned? How much did she know Aunt Patricia joined us, her boutique success making her bold? I was just telling Dorothy that you should consider a career change. 28 is still young enough to start over. Maybe something in fashion or interior design, something more suitable for a woman. I wanted to scream that I had been making a difference, that my work mattered more than all their money combined. But I just smiled and excused myself, needing air. On the back terrace, I found Emma smoking a cigarette, something she only did when stressed. You okay? She asked, offering me one. I don't smoke, I reminded her. Neither do I, she said, taking another drag. Officially. We stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the perfectly manicured garden. Even in November, my mother kept it pristine, bringing in heaters for the delicate plants, hiring people to rake leaves daily, so not a single one marred the lawn. She knows, Emma said quietly, about your job. I heard her on the phone yesterday with someone from your office. Well, former office. My heart stopped. Why didn't you warn me? I tried calling you 3 times today. You didn't answer. Emma stubbed out her cigarette. She's planning something, Cass. I don't know what, but she had that look. You know the one. I knew exactly which look she meant. The same one she'd had when she publicly disinvited my high school boyfriend from my graduation party because his father was a plumber. The same one she'd worn when she announced at my college acceptance dinner that I'd only gotten into Columbia because of her donations, not my grades. I should leave, I said. You can't. She'll just make it worse. You know she will. Emma grabbed my hand. Whatever happens, I'm here. Okay. But even Emma's support felt fragile. She was still dependent on our mother for medical school tuition, for her apartment, for her entire future. How much could she really stand up for me when push came to shove? We went back inside as dinner was announced. The dining room had been transformed into my mother's vision of perfection. The table extended to its full length, was covered in ivory linen and set with the Montgomery family china, each piece worth more than my monthly rent. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, sending tiny rainbows across the walls. The centerpiece was an elaborate arrangement of autumn flowers that probably cost more than most people's entire Thanksgiving dinner. The seating arrangement was deliberate, hierarchical. My mother at the head, my father at the opposite end, though his position was purely ceremonial. Marcus to her right as the eldest and most successful, Emma to her left as the baby with the most potential. I was placed halfway down the table between Aunt Patricia's boring husband and Cousin James's new girlfriend, who kept taking selfies with her food. As we took our seats, my mother remained standing, champagne glass in hand. "Before we begin," she announced, her voice cutting through the chatter, "I want to make a toast." My mother stood at the head of the table, her burgundy dress impeccable, her silver hair styled to perfection, looking every inch the matriarch she believed herself to be. She tapped her champagne flute with her knife, the crystal ringing out like a bell tolling for an execution. "Family." She began, her voice warm with the particular type of artificial sweetness she'd perfected over the years. "Another year, another Thanksgiving, another opportunity to celebrate our many blessings and achievements." She turned to Marcus first, of course. Marcus, my firstborn, who was just made partner at 31, the youngest in Goldman Sachs' history, following in the footsteps of giants but surpassing them all. "Your father and I couldn't be prouder." She raised her glass to him and everyone followed suit. Marcus nodded, trying to look humble but failing to hide his satisfaction. "And Jennifer," she continued, acknowledging my sister-in-law with a slight nod, "for supporting him and maintaining such a beautiful home. The renovation you did on your Tribeca apartment was featured in Architectural Digest. Such taste, such refinement." Jennifer's frozen smile twitched slightly, but she murmured her thanks. "Emma, my baby." Mother's voice softened genuinely for a moment. "Accepted to Johns Hopkins, one of only 12 residents selected from thousands of applicants. You'll be a surgeon before you're 30, saving lives and carrying on a noble tradition. Your great-grandfather would be so proud to see another doctor in the family." Emma shifted uncomfortably in her seat but managed a small smile. "And of course, we must celebrate Lauren's engagement." My mother gestured to my cousin, who immediately held up her ring again. "To Bradley Worthington III, no less. Such a good family. The wedding next summer at the Hamptons will be the event of the season, I'm sure." She went on praising Uncle Robert's latest property acquisition, Aunt Patricia's boutiques feature in town, and country cousin James making junior partner. Each accomplishment was acknowledged, celebrated, held up as an example of Montgomery excellence. Then her eyes found me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "And our Cassandra," she said, drawing out my name like she was savouring it. "Well, she's trying." Nervous laughter rippled around the table. I kept my face neutral, having learned long ago not to show weakness. "You know," she continued, swirling her champagne, "I've always believed in honesty within family. Secrets are like cancer. They grow in the dark, poisoning everything around them." My hands found the edge of the table, gripping hard, which is why I think we should address the elephant in the room. She paused for dramatic effect, and I saw several family members lean in, hungry for drama that didn't involve them. "Cassandra has been lying to all of us." "Mother," Marcus said, a warning in his voice, but she silenced him with a look. "She's been pretending to go to work every day for 2 months. 2 months of deception. Her little charity job, the one she chose over a real career, let her go. Laid off, discarded. And instead of coming to her family for help, instead of admitting her failure, she's been living a charade." Gasps around the table. Forks suspended midair. All eyes on me. "I have connections everywhere, dear," she said, looking directly at me. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out Patricia Chen from your office? She's a client of mine. She called me concerned about you. Wondered if you were all right since the layoffs. Imagine my surprise when I had to pretend I knew what she was talking about." "Dorothy," my father said quietly from his end of the table, "perhaps this isn't the time." She ignored him completely. "No, Harold, this is exactly the time. We're family. We should face the truth together." She took a sip of her champagne, savouring the moment. "I've watched you struggle for years, Cassandra. Watched you refuse every opportunity I've offered, too proud to accept help, too stubborn to admit you were wrong. You could have worked with Marcus. You could have gone to medical school like Emma. You could have married well like Lauren is doing. But no, you had to be different. You had to be special. Her laugh started soft, almost a chuckle, then grew louder, crueler. Others joined in nervously, not wanting to be on the wrong side of her mood. How does it feel to be useless daughter? The words hung in the air like a physical blow. At 28, you have nothing. No job, no husband, no children, no achievements worth mentioning. At least now you don't have to pretend anymore. We all know exactly what you are. Nothing. Uncle Robert smirked into his wine. Aunt Patricia tutted with false sympathy. Some of the cousins looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Jennifer stared at her plate. Marcus's jaw was clenched. Emma had tears in her eyes. My father finally looked up, his face a mask of pain and shame, but still he said nothing. The silence stretched out heavy and suffocating. My mother stood there triumphant, waiting for me to break, waiting for tears, for apologies, for me to beg forgiveness and admit she was right all along. Instead, I smiled. I stood up slowly, deliberately, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. My hands were steady as I smoothed down my dress, a simple black sheath that my mother had once called funeral attire, but which I thought was elegant in its simplicity. My smile wasn't forced or fake. It was real, born from a moment of absolute clarity. Thank you, Mother, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. Thank you for finally being honest about how you feel. It makes what I'm about to do so much easier. I pulled out my phone from my purse, fingers flying across the screen. For the past 2 years, I've been seeing a therapist. Dr. Sarah Martinez, excellent woman, specializes in survivors of narcissistic abuse. She helped me understand something crucial. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't too sensitive. I wasn't imagining things. Everything I felt, everything I experienced in this family, it was real, and it was abuse. How dare you? My mother started, but I held up my hand. I'm not done. You see, Dr. Martinez encouraged me to document everything. Every cruel comment, every public humiliation, every manipulation. I have recordings, Mother, years of them. I touched my phone screen and my mother's voice filled the room from a recording. Emma is going to be somebody. Marcus already is somebody. But Cassandra, well, we can't all be winners, can we? Someone has to be the cautionary tale. My mother's face went pale. You recorded private conversations. In New York, only one party needs to consent to recording, and I consented, I replied calmly. But that's not the best part. The best part is what I've done with all this material. I walked around the table slowly, like a lawyer presenting to a jury. For the past year, I've been writing a book. It's called Raised by Wolves, A Survivor's Guide to Narcissistic Parents. My agent, Rebecca Sullivan, you might have heard of her. She represents 3 New York Times bestsellers. She says it's the most powerful memoir she's read in a decade. Aunt Patricia gasped. You wrote about the family. I wrote about my experience, my truth. And apparently my truth resonates with a lot of people. The advance from Penguin Random House was $75,000. That's more than Emma's medical school scholarship, isn't it, Mother? I pulled up an email on my phone. Would you like me to read you what my editor said? Cassandra, your chapter about the Thanksgiving dinner where your mother publicly humiliated you is devastating and powerful. It's going to help so many people recognize and escape similar situations. That's libel, Uncle Robert sputtered. You can't publish lies about us. Truth is an absolute defense against libel, Uncle Robert. You should know that running all those shady property deals for Mother. Oh yes, I wrote about those too. About how you help her evict low-income tenants to flip buildings into luxury condos. About the bribes to city inspectors. About the tax evasion through shell companies in Delaware. Okay. My mother stood up so fast her chair fell backwards. You little bitch. There it is, I said, still smiling. The real Dorothy Montgomery. Not the polished society woman, not the successful entrepreneur, but the angry, bitter woman who needs to destroy others to feel powerful. I turned to Marcus. Chapter 12 is about you, brother dear. About how Mother bribed the admissions board to get you into Harvard. $200,000 to the Wright Foundation, wasn't it? You didn't earn your spot. You bought it. Marcus's face flushed red. That's not true. I have the cancelled checks. Mother kept impeccable records. She's proud of her manipulations. I looked at Jennifer. There's also a chapter about how Mother threatened to ruin your father's business unless you married Marcus. You never loved him, did you? You were just another acquisition for the Montgomery portfolio. Jennifer started crying, and for once it seemed genuine. Emma, I said more gently, turning to my sister, I didn't write much about you, just about the pressure that's crushing you, about the panic attacks you hide, about how you throw up before every family dinner because the stress makes you physically ill. "Stop," my father said, suddenly standing up. It was the loudest I'd heard him speak in years. "Just stop." "Why should I stop, Dad?" "You never stopped her. 28 years of watching her torture your children, and you never once stood up to her. You let her turn family dinners into public executions. You let her weaponize love turn affection into currency. You chose your comfortable prison over your children's well-being. But here's the thing about my job loss. I continued turning back to my mother. I wasn't laid off because of funding cuts. I was fired because I refused to stop investigating Montgomery Real Estate's illegal dumping of construction waste in protected wetlands. Your company mother. I was building a case against you. The room erupted. Everyone talking at once, accusations, flying denials, and demands for explanations. But I wasn't done. I was fired for doing the right thing. And yes, I kept it secret because I knew you'd use it against me. But losing that job was the best thing that ever happened to me. It freed me to tell this story. It freed me to stop seeking approval from someone incapable of giving it. It freed me to see this family for what it really is, a dysfunction dynasty built on lies, manipulation, and greed. I picked up my purse, ready to leave. The book comes out in 6 months. I've changed some names to protect the innocent, though there aren't many of those in this room. Mother, you're going to be famous, just not in the way you always wanted. My mother's face had transformed into something almost inhuman, rage twisting her features into a mask of pure hatred. She grabbed her wine glass and hurled it at me. I stepped aside and it shattered against the wall, leaving a red stain like blood on the cream wallpaper. "You ungrateful little parasite," she snarled, advancing toward me. "I gave you everything. I gave you life, a home, and education. I introduced you to the right people, opened doors for you, and this is how you repay me." "You gave me things with strings attached," I replied, standing my ground. "Every gift was a debt. Every opportunity was a collar. You didn't raise children, Mother. You raised hostages." Uncle Robert stood up, his face purple with rage. "You can't publish this garbage. I'll sue you into oblivion. I'll destroy you." "With what money, Uncle Robert?" I asked calmly. "The money you embezzle from Mother's company. Oh yes, I know about that too. 300,000 over the past 5 years. Small amounts carefully hidden, but I found the pattern. Mother knows too, doesn't she? But she keeps you around because you do her dirty work." Robert sat down hard, his face going from purple to white. "This is insane," Aunt Patricia said, her voice shaking. "Cassandra, you're destroying the family." "No, Aunt Patricia, I'm exposing what was already destroyed. Tell me, how does it feel knowing your entire business exists only because my mother owns you? That every success you've had is because she allows it. You dance to her tune, just like everyone else, terrified that she'll call in her loans if you displease her." My grandmother Eleanor, my mother's mother, had been silent this entire time, sitting in her wheelchair in the corner. Now she spoke, her voice cracked but clear. "The girl is right." Everyone turned to stare at her. "I've watched my daughter become a monster," Eleanor continued. "I blame myself. I was too hard on her, too demanding, too critical. I created this, but Cassandra is breaking the cycle." "Shut up, you senile old fool," my mother snapped at her own mother. "I may be old Dorothy, but I'm not senile, and I'm not poor either. Did you forget that I still control the family trust? The one that funds your entire empire." Eleanor smiled, a sharp, knowing smile. "I've been watching, documenting, just like Cassandra. I've already spoken to my lawyers. The trust is being restructured. You're out, Dorothy. All of it goes to the grandchildren, but only if they agree to therapy and distance themselves from you." The explosion that followed was spectacular. My mother lunged at me, screaming incoherently. Marcus and 2 cousins had to physically restrain her. She clawed at them, spittle flying from her mouth as she raged. "I gave you everything. Everything. You were nothing without me. You are nothing without me." "That's where you're wrong," I said, backing toward the door. "I'm everything without you. I just needed to realize it." My father stepped forward. "Cassandra, wait." I paused, looking at this man who had been a ghost in my life, present, but never really there. "I'm leaving your mother," he said quietly. "I've already seen a lawyer. I've been documenting things too. Financial abuse, emotional abuse, coercive control. I'm done." "Harold, don't you dare," my mother hissed, but he ignored her. "I'm sorry," he said to me, to Marcus, to Emma. "I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. I was a coward. I chose the easy path, and you all paid the price. Emma stood up, tears streaming down her face. I don't want to do the residency. I don't even want to be a doctor. I only did it because Mother demanded it. I want to teach. Elementary school. I want to teach kids. You're throwing your life away, Mother screamed at her, still being held back by Marcus. No, Emma said, her voice stronger. I'm taking it back. Marcus looked at our mother, then at his wife, then at me. Jennifer and I have been in counselling. She told me about the threats to her father. We're working through it, but Cassandra's right. This ends now. You're all nothing without me, Mother raged. I made this family. I made each of you. You'll come crawling back when you realise what you've lost. Lauren, who had been silent this whole time, suddenly stood up. I'm calling off the wedding. Everyone looked at her in shock. Bradley is just like you, Aunt Dorothy, controlling, critical, cruel. I was marrying him because I thought that's what success looked like. But if success means becoming you, I'd rather fail. One by one, family members began to leave. Some stormed out in anger, others left quietly ashamed. A few came to me whispering apologies, thanks, or words of support. Soon only the core family remained. Me, Marcus, Emma, our parents, and grandmother Eleanor. Mother sat in her chair looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, abandoned by the empire she'd built on fear and manipulation. You've destroyed everything, she said, her voice hollow. No, Mother. I've revealed everything. There's a difference. I walked over to grandmother Eleanor, kissing her weathered cheek. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you, dear girl. You did what I never had the courage to do. As I reached the door, my mother's voice, broken, now stopped me. Why did you do this? I turned back one last time. Because I spent 28 years trying to earn love that was never available. Because you taught me that I was worthless and I believed you. Because every achievement I earned was never enough and every failure was proof of my inadequacy. Because you made me feel like I was drowning in my own life. I paused, looking at this woman who had given me life, but tried to destroy my soul. But mostly I did it because someone needs to break the cycle. Someone needs to stand up and say, no more. Someone needs to show that the emperor has no clothes, that the matriarch is just a scared, angry woman who builds herself up by tearing others down. I did it because I could. Because I'm stronger than you ever gave me credit for. Because I'm not useless, Mother. I never was. 6 months later, I sat in my new office in Burlington, Vermont, a small but sunny space above a coffee shop. The walls were decorated with thank you letters from readers, people who had found strength in my story to confront their own family demons. The book had launched 2 weeks ago and already hit the New York Times bestseller list. My consulting firm, Phoenix Environmental Solutions, was small but growing. 3 former colleagues had joined me, and we'd already landed contracts with 2 major environmental groups. We were doing the work that mattered without the politics and bureaucracy that had plagued my previous job. More importantly, we were doing it on our own terms. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. She'd sent a photo from her classroom, her 3rd graders holding up drawings of their favourite animals. Her smile was radiant, genuine, in a way it had never been when she was pre-med. She'd moved to Portland, gotten her teaching certificate, and found her calling. The panic attacks had stopped. The stress vomiting was gone. She was healing. Marcus checked in regularly too. He and Jennifer had separated amicably, both acknowledging that their marriage had been built on coercion rather than love. He'd left Goldman Sachs, taking a massive pay cut to work for a non-profit that provided financial literacy education to underserved communities. Jennifer had moved back to California, reconnected with her college sweetheart, and seemed genuinely happy for the first time since I'd known her. My father had followed through with the divorce. The proceedings were ugly, with Mother fighting for every penny, but Grandmother Eleanor's intervention had been decisive. The family trust, worth $40 million, had been restructured exactly as she'd promised. Mother got nothing from it. Dad had moved to a small apartment near the university where he'd started teaching again, part-time at first, then full-time, when he remembered how much he loved it. We had dinner every Wednesday, now slowly building the relationship we'd never been allowed to have. The extended family had fractured. Uncle Robert was under investigation for embezzlement and tax fraud. My book had prompted an audit, and the investigators found more than even I had known about. Aunt Patricia's boutique had failed within 3 months of losing Mother's financial support, but she'd landed on her feet working as a buyer for a department store. She'd actually thanked me last month, saying it was a relief to not owe anyone anything anymore. Lauren had indeed called off her wedding and gone back to school for social work. She wanted to help other women trapped in controlling relationships. We'd become closer than we'd ever been as children, bonding over our shared experiences and commitment to healing. As for my mother, she still had her real estate empire, though significantly diminished by the divorce settlement and legal investigations. She lived alone in that massive house, maintaining her society connections through sheer force of will and strategic donations. She'd threatened to sue over the book, but her lawyers advised against it. Truth, as I'd told Uncle Robert, was an absolute defense. She'd tried to contact me once 3 months after Thanksgiving. A letter handwritten on her monogram stationery. It was full of justifications, accusations, and twisted attempts at manipulation. But buried in the middle was one line that almost seemed genuine: "I only wanted you to be strong." I'd thought about that line a lot. In her warped way, maybe she had been trying to prepare us for a harsh world. But strength built on cruelty creates brittle people who shatter under pressure. Real strength comes from love, support, and the knowledge that you're valuable just for existing, not for what you achieve. Dr. Martinez and I still met weekly, working through the layers of trauma, the ingrained beliefs that I was never enough, the reflexive need to earn love rather than simply accept it. It was hard work, harder than any legal brief I'd ever written. Some days I'd catch myself seeking approval, falling into old patterns, and have to consciously redirect my thoughts. Healing isn't linear. It's messy and complicated and sometimes feels impossible, but it's also revolutionary. Every day I choose to believe I have worth is a victory. Every boundary I set is an act of rebellion against my programming. Every moment of self-compassion is a small miracle. I'd started dating someone, a fellow environmental lawyer named David, who'd never once asked about my family's money or connections. He liked me for my passion, my terrible jokes, and my inability to keep houseplants alive. He'd read my book before our first date, wanting to understand where I came from. "Your mother sounds terrifying," he'd said simply, "but she was wrong about you. You're not useless. You're extraordinary." The word had made me cry right there in the restaurant. Not because it was romantic, though it was, but because for the first time in my life, I was beginning to believe it might be true. My book tour had taken me across the country, speaking to rooms full of people who saw their own families in mine. The stories they shared were heartbreaking and inspiring in equal measure. Adult children who'd gone no contact with toxic parents. Siblings working to rebuild relationships after years of being pitted against each other. Parents who recognized their own harmful patterns and were fighting to change them. After one event in Chicago, an elderly woman approached me. She was elegantly dressed, reminding me painfully of my mother. "I'm 73 years old," she said, "and I've been waiting my whole life for someone to put words to what I experienced. My mother was like yours. I never had the courage to speak up. I let her poison my marriage, my relationships with my children. But it's not too late. I'm in therapy now. I'm trying to make amends. Your book gave me permission to admit that my mother didn't love me the way mothers should love their children, and that it wasn't my fault." Moments like that made everything worth it. The family I'd lost, the Christmas I'd spend alone this year, the birthday cards that wouldn't come, they all felt like acceptable losses compared to the freedom I'd gained and the people I'd helped. Grandmother Eleanor passed away 2 months after the book came out. She'd been declining for years, but I think she held on long enough to see the cycle broken. She left me a letter along with my portion of the trust. It read, "Dear Cassandra, you have a gift for truth-telling that skipped a generation. Your mother got my ambition, but not my heart. You got both. Use them wisely. Don't let the anger consume you the way it consumed us. Love, Grandmother." I'd framed that letter, hanging it next to my degrees. It was the first time anyone in my family had told me I had gifts worth noting. The trust money was substantial enough that I'd never have to worry about financial security again. But I didn't touch it at first, afraid that using it would somehow mean my mother had won, that I did need the family money after all. Dr. Martinez helped me work through that. "The money isn't your mother's," she pointed out. "It's your grandmother's gift to you. Accepting it isn't weakness. It's honoring someone who recognized your worth." So I used some of it to expand the consulting firm, to take on cases for clients who couldn't afford to pay, to fight the kind of environmental criminals my mother protected. It felt like poetic justice. The rest I put away for the future, for the family I hope to build someday. A family based on unconditional love, where achievements were celebrated, but failure was met with support, not shame. Where children knew they were valuable simply for existing. Where love wasn't a reward for good behavior, but a constant, reliable presence. I thought about my mother, often wondering if she sat in that big, empty house and reflected on how she'd ended up alone. Did she ever consider that her pursuit of control had cost her everything worth controlling? Did she lie awake at night replaying that Thanksgiving dinner, wondering if she could have chosen differently? In her own twisted way, she had made me strong, just not in the way she'd intended. She'd tried to break me, and in breaking, I'd found my truth. She'd tried to silence me, and in finding my voice, I'd helped others find theirs. She'd called me useless, and in proving her wrong, I'd discovered my purpose. As I finished typing the last chapter of my second book, After the Wolves Building a Life Beyond Trauma, I thought about that Thanksgiving dinner one more time. The moment when my mother laughed and asked how it felt to be useless. The moment when everything changed. The moment when I chose myself over family approval. It had been the hardest and best decision of my life. Standing up to a narcissistic parent feels like betraying everything you've been programmed to believe. Family loyalty, respect for elders, honoring thy mother and father, these concepts get weaponized by toxic parents to maintain control. Breaking free feels like becoming the villain in your own story. But I wasn't the villain. I was the hero who finally showed up for herself. I was the knight who slayed the dragon that everyone else was too afraid to face. I was the child who said the emperor has no clothes, even when the whole court insisted on the beauty of his robes. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Marcus. "Hey," he said, his voice warm in a way it never used to be. "Emma and I are planning to spend Thanksgiving together this year. Nothing fancy, just dinner at her place. Dad's coming. We wanted to know if you'd join us." I smiled, feeling tears prick my eyes. "I'd love to." "Good. Emma's attempting to cook a turkey for the first time. We might need backup plans." We laughed and it felt easy, natural. We were building something new from the ashes of our family dysfunction. Not perfect, but real. Not without pain, but committed to healing. After we hung up, I looked at the final paragraph of my new book. Every family has that one person who breaks the cycle, the one who stands up and says no more, the one who refuses to pass the poison to the next generation, the one who chooses healing over habit, truth over tradition, authenticity over approval. If you're reading this, maybe you're that person for your family. It won't be easy. You'll lose people you love. You'll question yourself 1,000 times. You'll feel guilty, afraid, and alone. But on the other side of that pain is freedom. On the other side of that loss is peace. On the other side of that fear is a life that's truly yours. Your family may call you useless, ungrateful, or worse, but you're not breaking the family. You're breaking the cycle. And that's the most useful thing you could possibly do. I saved the document, closed my laptop, and looked out at the Vermont mountains. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere in Connecticut, my mother was probably having dinner alone in her perfect dining room, surrounded by her perfect things, wondering why her perfect plans had failed. But here, in my imperfect apartment, with my rescue cat purring on my lap and my chosen family a phone call away, I had everything I needed. I had truth. I had freedom. I had peace. I had worth that no one could take away. The woman who'd stood up at that Thanksgiving table with a smile, who'd refused to crumble under the weight of her mother's cruelty, who'd chosen truth over comfort, she was still here. Stronger, clearer, free. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be powerless. Sometimes the greatest success is simply surviving and telling your story. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, but living a life so authentic and full that the people who tried to diminish you become footnotes in your biography rather than main characters. My mother had asked me how it felt to be useless. Now I knew the answer. I wouldn't know. I never was. Looking back, that Thanksgiving disaster was the best gift my mother ever gave me, though she'd never intended it as such. In trying to destroy me publicly, she'd freed me from the private prison of seeking her approval. In calling me useless, she'd pushed me to discover my use. In laughing at my pain, she'd taught me that her opinion of me was more about her than it ever was about me. The calls and emails from readers continued to pour in, people sharing their own stories of family dysfunction, thanking me for giving them permission to prioritize their mental health over family harmony. Therapists recommending the book to clients. Support groups using it as a discussion guide. Each message reminded me that our stories have power, that truth-telling can be revolutionary, that one person's courage can inspire another's freedom. I thought about the upcoming Thanksgiving with my siblings and father. It would be different from anything we'd known. No crystalline china, no competitive achievement announcements, no performative perfection. Just 4 people who'd survived the same war, sharing a meal, and maybe finally some genuine peace. Emma had texted earlier, "I'm attempting Mum's famous cranberry sauce recipe, but making it with love instead of judgment. Wish me luck." Marcus had replied, "The secret ingredient was always criticism. It might taste better without it." Even Dad had chimed in, "I'll bring wine, the cheap kind. Let's celebrate having nothing to prove." We were learning to be a family without the dysfunction to love, without conditions to gather, without fear. It was clumsy and awkward, and sometimes painful, but it was real. As night fell over Vermont, I made myself dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta with marinara sauce, and a glass of wine that cost less than $12. I ate it at my small kitchen table, looking at the manuscript I'd just finished, feeling proud of work that paid moderately, but mattered immensely. By every metric my mother valued, I was indeed a failure. Average apartment, modest car, single at 29, no children, no designer clothes, no country club membership. But by the metrics that actually mattered, I was thriving. I had meaningful work, authentic relationships, good therapy, and most importantly, I had myself. The real me, not the performance of me that my family had demanded. My cat jumped onto the table, knocking over my water glass. As I cleaned up the mess, laughing at his complete lack of remorse, I realized this was happiness. Not the Instagram-worthy moments my mother had curated, but the simple, imperfect, genuine life. The woman who'd laughed at me that Thanksgiving, who'd called me useless in front of 23 family members, who'd tried to break me with her cruelty, she'd actually done me a favor. She'd pushed me so far that I'd finally pushed back. She'd hurt me so badly that I'd finally sought healing. She'd convinced me I was worthless so thoroughly that I'd had to discover my own worth to survive. So thank you, Mother. Thank you for showing me exactly what not to be. Thank you for the trauma that led to transformation. Thank you for the pain that became purpose. Thank you for calling me useless, because proving you wrong became my greatest achievement. But most of all, thank you for that laugh, that cruel, dismissive laugh that echoed through the dining room and straight into my soul. Because that was the moment I realized your opinion of me was not my reality. That was the moment I chose my truth over your lies. That was the moment I became free. To everyone watching who's ever been called useless, worthless, or not enough by someone who should have loved you unconditionally, you are none of those things. You are valuable simply because you exist. Your worth isn't determined by achievements or approval. You don't have to earn love. Real love is freely given. If my story resonates with you, if you see your own family in mine, if you're struggling to break free from similar dynamics, please know you're not alone. Healing is possible. Freedom is achievable. You can build a beautiful life from the rubble of dysfunction. What moment made you realize you needed to break your family's toxic cycle? Share your story in the comments below, and if this video helped you feel less alone, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they're not useless, that they never were. Thank you for witnessing my story, for holding space for this truth, and for being part of a community that chooses healing over harm, authenticity over approval, and truth over tradition. May you find the courage to stand up at your own table, smile at your own critics, and choose your own worth. You are not what they said you were. You never were.